Okay, so been talking about this for a while. Every new year, since we're still in the New Year month, right? People set goals. We know this. Companies set initiatives, leaders issue policies, students double down on training. And when things don't work, the assumption is usually the same, right? We just didn't try hard enough, we didn't stick with it. And that may be true. But what if effort isn't the problem? What if the real failure happens before effort even begins? Right? In the assumptions we never question. And in tonight's episode, right, we're not going to be focusing on motivation. Right? It's not about motivation. It's not about discipline, and it's definitely not about techniques. Right? It's a continuation of what we've been talking about since the start of the new year, right? Not about the things we can do to succeed, but about another in a list of things that can hold us back and prevent success that we haven't accounted for during our planning, right? It's about why good intentions and real effort still collapse under pressure in self-defense, in organizations, in leadership, and in life. Because when reality stops cooperating, right? Effort alone doesn't save you. Right? We know this, right? We're all adults. We know this, right? Effort by itself doesn't do it, right? Awareness does. And part of that is the awareness of assumptions, of beliefs and impediments that lie beneath the surface, that are already there, right? That we know will cause failure if we're not paying attention, right? If we're not dealing with them, right? So we'll talk about these things and more during this episode of Kuden. So let's get started.
So, the big question is this: how are self-defense and success-minded people like us, concerned citizens worried about protecting ourselves, our loved ones, and the things we care about from the monsters we know exist in the world? How do we train in a way that gives us the skills, knowledge, and understanding we need without becoming paranoid fighters or killers ourselves, and yet still allows us to be the hero protector the world needs us to be? That's the question, and this podcast will give you the answers. My name is Jeffrey Miller, and welcome to Kuden Radio. Real training for real people in a real world.
All right, little admin thing here before we get started. I hate doing this, but we had a major snowstorm. And for those of you who are on live, some of you are probably in regions where we had snow, a lot of it. But some people had ice and whatnot. So I'm assuming if you're on, then you're not some of those folks that are without power and likely to be without power, right? So if you're one of my students, long distance or not, or you're just a follower or whatnot, in the comments, kind of let us know that you're safe. If you're not on live and you're listening to it fairly close to our air date of this one, which is January 26th of 2026, whenever you can check in, that'd be awesome, just so we know. But I know James is exhausted. My back is not feeling the best and whatnot, but you got to do what you got to do. So anyway, James, who do we have on? I see that folks are a little slow tonight, but it could be the topic. It could be, it could be shoveling snow. So, first of all, is the sound okay? I had a technical glitch getting on before I signed in. That caused me to be a little bit late connecting with you before things, but is everything come across okay?
Yes, very good.
You still have your end. Awesome. Okay. All right. Anybody check in? Yeah? No? Maybe?
Alan and Dave.
Alan and Dave. All right. So, let's see, where am I? Should probably bring up my notes here. And all right, so I'm just going to go ahead and dive into things, and we'll check back to see if anybody's on or who's on, who checks in. All right, so again, welcome to this week's episode of Kuden Radio. This is episode 294. Right, so 6 more, and we're going to do something special for our 300th episode. But again, welcome to Kuden, where we don't just talk about training, we talk about what actually survives pressure. Right? And during this episode, we're going to do a continuation of something that we've been circling since the new year, and that's why effort fails. Right? Everybody likes to set New Year's resolutions. They like to set goals and all that. It's kind of a tradition in a lot of places this time of year. And that's not a bad thing, right? Goal setting, planning, projecting to move forward and all that. Always a good thing, right? But then things kind of collapse, right? For one reason or another, okay? And assumptions can be made, right? We just didn't work hard enough. We dropped the ball, whatever, right? But the thing that we've been circling since the beginning of the year, in one form or another, is to look at why effort fails, right? Why we can't just, push through with willpower alone or effort alone or whatever, right? So what we're looking at is what prevents good people serious about success and accomplishing their goals from making it happen or doing what they believe is right, Putting in the effort and still watching things fail or fall apart. Okay. It's huge, right? And so let's be real clear here, right? This is not about laziness, right? The folks, the kind of people that I'm talking about, right? The things are not failing or falling apart from laziness, right? Not from lack of commitment, right? But I believe it's from a misplaced confidence in systems and plans that were never tested where it mattered most. Okay. And sometimes we have the experience to do that. And other times we need somebody to help with that. But we have to be careful, right? We have to be careful that we're not just ad hoc asking anybody, right? Best friend, whatever, for help, right? The experience that maybe we don't have or we don't have enough of, from people that have never done what we're trying to do, have never succeeded in areas where we're trying to go, right? Showing our plans to a friend or family member or whatever, just to get an okay, just to get, oh, yeah, sounds good, right? It's not the same. Or even taking it to someone who they have no experience in the realm. But again, I say I'm not a fan of just going to people who have experience in the realm I'm going to. I want people that are highly, highly successful in that realm, right? And the reason for that is because they've probably failed a lot, right? They failed forward to get where they were going. Right? I find it very difficult to believe, and it's easy to see how people could believe it, but where people just like, hey, it was an overnight success. No. When the news says that somebody was an overnight success, or we've been led to believe that somebody was an overnight success, right? What that means usually is that nobody had a clue who they were yesterday, but today, like, they're all over the place. Okay. What's missing is the weeks, months, years, decades, right, of trial and error, right? And even if somebody did make it, right, my question is like, can they do it again? Okay, repeat the success. Okay, start another business. Use the same process. Okay, I know you're gonna be doing something else, right? First one you sold widgets. Next time you'll sell, I don't know, wadgets, whatever, right? But do it again. Okay, because we're talking about processes that survive the failure process, right? Because anybody can be successful when everything is going well, right? We all have good days. Nothing disturbed us, right? But, and I understand people doing people things, right? Unexpected things happening, right? But that's what we're training for. That's what we're supposed to be able to do. That shows resilience. But if we're beating ourselves up long after the event is over, that's problematic, right? Anyway, right. Again, I said this earlier if you were on for the pre-intro, right? It's not a motivational episode, right? It's not a critique, and it's definitely not a technique lesson, right? Excuse me, right? So what we're doing today is failure analysis, because one of the most uncomfortable truths, whether we're talking about self-defense, whether we're talking about leadership, organizational safety, whatever, right? One of the most uncomfortable truths is this: most people don't fail because they didn't try hard enough. Right? They fail because what they assumed would matter didn't. Okay? Effort does not. I'm going to take that back. Effort alone does not equal preparedness. Okay? Good intentions do not guarantee functional outcomes. You know what they say, right? The road to hell is paved with good intentions. Paved with good intentions. Right. And assumptions only survive calm conditions. Okay. In the military, we used to say that no plan survives first contact with the enemy. And that's why skill sets have to be developed a certain way. Plans have to be developed a certain way that allows for the freedom to adapt to that collapse, to that failure point, but still be operationally sound to accomplish the task, to accomplish the goal. Okay. Some people fold as soon as the plan has the first hiccup in it, right? And some people, as soon as first contact is made, just wing it, right? And then they end up like nowhere close to where they wanted to be. Okay. And then all kinds of things happen, right? Blame game, whatever. Okay. We're not going to be talking about those people tonight, right? We're going to be talking about people with the best of intentions. They have planned. They are dumping in a shit ton of effort, and something's off. Okay. But we have to accept the reality that what we're working on, what we're training on. And again, you could be a leader in an organization not having anything to do with workplace violence or self-defense or safety or anything like that. Or you could be a parent, right, who's raising kids. You could be whatever, right? My forte happens to be translating this stuff into other realms, from the how to not lose at the hands of violence and somebody dangerous, right? But either way, right? And again, assumptions only survive calm conditions. So once pressure enters, once time compresses, emotion spikes, right? Chaos shows up. Many of the things that people rely on quietly or pretty freaking overtly stop working, right? And they don't stop working like up front, right? They don't stop working overtly. They don't stop working loudly, right? They don't announce themselves, right? By the time we see the failure, by the time we see the consequences, right? things have already cascaded. Okay. These things fail quietly, silently, right? Until the consequences appear. I've got a few students in my Warrior Comeback one-on-one coaching system. And one of the things that I take them through, and it's all self-discovery things. I just give them little exercises to kind of work on. But one of the very first lessons they get is whatever they're experiencing, whatever they're seeing as failure or breakdown or things. This is not what I planned for, right? Those things. These are what I'm talking about. These are the things they keep trying to fix, right? They keep trying to get friends or family members to see things their way or be team players or whatever, right? So the things they keep trying to fix are not the problem. Okay? The problem is not the problem, just like the technique is not the technique, right? They're the symptoms, right? They're what the breakdown looks like by the time we get a hold of it. Okay. So if you're a martial artist, right, this matters. If you're responsible for people, policy, decisions, right, it matters even more because preparedness doesn't reveal itself in planning. It reveals itself in breakdown. Okay. In martial arts training, we have randori, right? Some people call it sparring, but I differentiate the two. And sparring left uncontrolled can just lead somebody to make up their own style that can have little to no bearing or resemble. It doesn't resemble the principles and concepts that the system is supposed to be teaching, right? But it's designed. These things are designed to insert pressure. They're designed to create confusion, collapse, like the plan. They're supposed to break the comfort level, right? To expose problem areas so that we can fix them. Okay. Because preparedness doesn't reveal itself in the planning, right? It reveals itself in the breakdown. Okay. And so we're going to explore this. We're going to explore some of these assumptions, some of these beliefs, some of these breaking points, and why this matters. Okay. Because again, what a lot of people tend to do, it's kind of a primitive instinct that when things start to collapse or things start to fall apart, right? What we do is we throw more effort and energy and work at them. Okay, we do it harder, we do it faster, we do more of it, right? And if that doesn't work, everybody has their own coping mechanisms. But some people can go off into a corner, and they'll just be angry, but out of sight for everybody else. But in their head, they're running the loop, right? So again, effort, energy, whatever. Okay. We're going to see how this is more like it's a defense mechanism, right? They're defending the assumptions, they're defending the style, they're defending the decision, they're defending the plan instead of actually adapting to the reality of what's going on in front of them. Okay. And this is a process of exposing. Right? Exposure. Ego doesn't like it, but that's what it is, right? We have to expose the areas where knowledge isn't enough, right? Or what we know, or the tools that we have that way, right? We don't have answers for this, right? Or the physical skills, or whatever it is, right? We're missing something, okay, that we need in this moment, and trying to make the square peg fit in the round hole harder, faster, whatever, just creates more of a problem. All right. So anyway, before I jump into this problem with assuming that effort equals preparedness, before we dive into this much more deeply, let's just let me jump back over here. James, anybody else sign in? How we doing? Anybody give us a thumbs up on sound and all that? We're still good when that glitching, snow and ice are not an issue. Somewhere
No,
between
it's good.
everybody else. Okay.
Maury checked in and Technicolor checked in. Said good evening.
Cool. Awesome. Good evening, guys. All right. So here's again what we're looking at during this episode is not just when our effort fails us, right? But how assumptions and where these assumptions cause collapse, right? We're primarily going to be coming at this from the self-protection, violence prevention, those kind of things perspective, but I will be, referencing other areas as well. But it doesn't matter if we're talking about just goal attainment. There's something I'm trying to achieve in my life. I'm trying to, who knows, build a home dojo, or I'm trying to buy a new car, get that guy or girl to date me, whatever it is, right? And how those assumptions can get in the way, right? We're going to be exposing failure points, okay? Typically from a very subtle level, right? So, yeah. So let's do that, right? So here's the first failure point, okay? And this one is subtle, okay? And that is that practice does not equal capability, okay? Practice does not equal capability. Repetition does not equal alignment, okay? Well, because we've all been taught some version of the adage that practice makes perfect, right? But every serious teacher I've ever had corrected that immediately, right? Practice does not make perfect. Because if what we're practicing is flawed, then we're going to get really good at flawed whatever that thing is, okay? Practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect, okay? And perfect here doesn't mean flawless, okay? It means aligned, okay? Alignment of structure, alignment of timing, alignment of intention, based on context, based on conditions, right? So in the beginning, let's say in the beginning of a martial artist career, we're given kata, we're given these models, okay? And so alignment here is getting the parts right, making sure that kamae is right, making sure that the step is right, weight distribution across the legs is right, those kind of things, right? There is a right and a wrong, right? No adaptation, right? But here's the thing, right? The reason that we're focused on alignment and not just doing more, okay? Because I remember I've been in the Encyclopedia of Martial Arts. Teachers wanting, right, whether it was in class or at home, okay, 100 repetitions of the same movement or more, right, or whatever it was, okay. But I came to learn and be told by other teachers, right, and it wasn't like, well, they said this and they said this and I have to pick. No, what I have to do is test these two to see which one actually produces the results. And what I found out was that I could do things with less repetitions, like some sort of teacher said, to produce correct results, where if I did more than that minimum or that maximum, I was actually hurting everything. I was actually producing, with more work, more effort, I was actually producing more crap. Now, it could look good, Looked really good in the dojo, looked really good in performance and all that kind of stuff. But when pressure was exerted, when I was forced to adapt, when I was surprised, oh, what came out was bad movement. Well, how's that possible? Okay. Well, it's because volume alone creates a problem most people don't see. Okay. And again, I said this was subtle, right? So what's the problem? The problem is fatigue. Okay. The muscles get tired. And as fatigue sets in, the body compensates. Okay. Secondary systems take over. So movement still happens, and they can still look like they're correct on the outside, but they're no longer what you think they are. Okay? You feel productive, but you're actually rehearsing failure. Okay, let me come at this a different way. If anybody knows what a Roman sit-up is, and they're called different things, right? But like when I first started in the military, this is what we did. And then, let's see, I was in what was then West Germany, when this change came around, and guys figured or learned very, very quickly how weak our abdominal muscles really were, even though we had been passing PT tests for a long time. And then we made a switch to an exercise that actually targeted the ab muscles. And gosh, shit. Not only did it hurt like hell, but like we weren't able to do half of what we could do before, if that. So Roman chair sit-ups is those ones where you're laying on your back, right? You bring your feet in, so your knees are up, right? Put the hands behind the head or the neck, right? And then you sit all the way up to touch the tip of the elbows to the knees or the thighs. Okay, you guys remember these? Okay, and we do these things over and over and over again, right? What I didn't notice until we made the exercise change was that my abs never hurt, or didn't hurt very much. Okay, what hurt were hip joints, thigh muscles, things like that. And a butt ton of us, including yours truly, ended up with something known as a pelvic tilt, right? A pelvic tilt is where the pelvis itself, right, where the femurs plug into, and it's, you know, base of the belly and all that big old bone, right? It rocks forward. Okay, well, it's not really rocking forward; it's being pulled out of alignment forward. So what ends up happening is, and you see a lot of these guys, old military and whatnot, where upper body, head, shoulders, whatever, and then all of a sudden the hips are forward, and then the legs are back. Okay, marching was done this way. Whatever. What the hell's going on? Well, what's happening is that these Roman chair sit-ups were not focusing on the ab muscles. They were focusing on the psoas muscle. This is the muscle that folds you in half at your hips, right? When you bend over. I don't mean when you fold your back this way. I mean from the hips, right? You fold, okay? Your abs do very little of that. As a matter of fact, they may get you started like a little bit, but that's not it. If you bend over to pick up a pencil you dropped on the ground or something like that, right? You're firing your psoas muscle, right? It's this squid butterfly-ish shaped muscle that is attached to the front of your spine, not like the rest of your back muscles. It's attached to the front of your spine. It's got a butterfly, Japanese fan shaped, whatever, right? Thing with these two tentacles that come down off of it, right? So it's attached to the front of your spine, and then these tentacles go through your hip assembly and attach to the front-ish part of your thighs, okay? And so when it contracts, bend in half. Or it's what allows gymnasts who do like rings and bars and things like that to bring the legs up into this pike position, this 90-degree angle, right? Torso, and then up into with the legs, right? That's the psoas muscle, right? That's a very different type of pain, okay? But because it's kind of in the hips, up into the torso, it can be confused with things. Okay. But once we actually started doing crunches, right, then we realized what the abs actually doing work did. And then when we were taught, again, when we first did it, right, people were just doing crunches, right? Those of you on audio only, I'm making my air quotes, right? Crunches, right? When in reality, we can separate crunches based on the group of abs that we're working on, right? High, mid, or low. And high and mid are fine for kind of lifting the body a little bit, but to get to do the low abs, the ones that are our kicking muscles and whatnot, right? That's a very different exercise, right? The back never leaves the ground, the head never leaves the ground, right? But back to Roman chair sit-ups, okay? So we're doing these things, right? And I believe when I was in the minimum for passing the PT test, the physical training test at that point was 50 or 60, something like that. Okay. But if anybody's ever done these, right, you start off strong, right? Pulling up, everything is good, right? And then all of a sudden, you hit a point where things are tiring out, right? And another thing that makes these things dangerous is that they were having us interlace the fingers, right, behind our head, behind our neck. And then as the stomach muscles, not stomach muscles, but either way, as they tire out, what happens is, right, we start yanking, right, to pull the upper body up into the position, right? Kind of rock a little bit and then pull up, because all that counted, all that mattered was hitting the number. Okay. Meanwhile, we're wrecking our neck, right? Upper back, and we're not doing anything extra. What we're doing is we're compensating for a muscle that has hit its fatigue point, and right. So other systems are compensating to get the motion to happen so that the elbows touch the knees, because that's all that mattered. That's all that was counting. But we're rehearsing failure. Okay. So it's not the same. So my teachers said, I would rather you do 3 repetitions of this form, of this exercise or whatever, correctly, than to do 20 or 30 or whatever, where 27 or 17 or whatever are going to be not correct, no matter what they look like. Okay? Because the more you do it, the more the muscles fatigue. The more the muscles fatigue, the more other systems have to kick in to get it right, right? To make it look right. But that system or that movement done correctly doesn't change anything. Okay. This is seen when I go into companies. And again, this is not a critique. This is not a judgment call or whatever, because when folks are ignorant, and I don't mean stupid, the ignorant here means they don't know any better. Okay. It's not their realm. Right. When I go in and I'm doing an assessment of their workplace violence procedures, right? Because at this point, prevention has already failed. So why everything is lumped under workplace violence prevention, but the evacuation plan for like an active shooter is in there. See, things get convoluted here because that's response. That's not prevention. If we need response, prevention has failed. But if we don't have that dividing line, then things really start to get screwy. Okay. But I go in and I look, and they've checked off the box because they have an evacuation plan. Okay. And then I look at their evacuation plan, and at the corner up here it says fire escape or fire evacuation. And I say, no. What I want is your workplace violence, an active shooter evacuation plan. And they go, yeah, we just use the same thing. And then I have to ask other follow-up questions that hopefully get things across, which is, where's the shooter? Well, we don't know. Well, then how do you know that if you would just pull the fire alarm bell to get people to go out, that people are not going to enter the area where the shooters are? They're not going to bypass or interact with them somehow, and you're not going to create more damage than not, right? An evacuation plan should outline, it should start with communications, usually coded, right, that tell every department who should move, right, who should stay in place, okay? You know, the run, hide, fight thing, that overly simplified kind of thing that everybody relies on, right? And who shouldn't even know that anything's going on, because there's a bunch of other things that can happen when people get curious, right? Or people get heroic or whatever, okay? But neither way, right? Regardless of whether we're talking about somebody just taking the fire escape or fire evacuation plan and inserting it as the active shooter evacuation plan, or the Roman chair sit-ups, or the martial arts student deciding that, well, if 3 repetitions of this are good, then 300 are going to make me phenomenal. No, it's kind of like medicine, right? Proper dosage, you get benefits. You overdo it, all medicines are poisons. Okay, do the math. Okay, but what ends up happening is it makes us feel productive, right? But again, we're rehearsing failure, right? One of the Japanese teachers that I work with, Shrai Sensei, he says it simply in his best Japanese grammar applied to English words, right? But this is perfect, right? He says, good action do, good situation make. Okay. And this is not just a martial arts thing. This is a life thing, right? Good action do, good situation make, right? Not more action, not harder action, correct action. Okay? Correct action. Right? This is causality, cause and effect. Right? Preparedness isn't measured by how much you did. It's measured by whether what you did still functions when conditions change. Okay? It's measured by whether or not whether or not you were right, you followed the rules, you followed the form, whatever. Okay? You did what you always do, right? It's measured by whether or not you're still functional after things change. How functional you are when everything's run their course. Okay? That's the first crack, right? That's the first failure point. Okay? I posted something on Facebook, was it today, yesterday, something like that, right? Simply says, when a student learns that your job is not to be right, your job is to remain functional, because there's always something next, okay? Then we're getting somewhere. Again, paraphrased. Okay. So anyway, talk about why training breaks first here in just a minute. But James, any questions, comments? What do we have next? Okay. Everybody like my shirt? Well, I'm waiting for James in there. Okay. Right. So I'm not going to stand up far enough for this, right? Normally, I mean, this is a picture of Socrates, right? Okay. He never said this. Okay. So just in case anybody wants to like take a screenshot and post it up, like, you know, good enough. Socrates, right? No. Okay. My wife got this for me for Christmas. I don't know, maybe like 2 years ago or whatever. I don't wear shirts like this very often, but I thought this would be apropos for this one, you know? Yeah. Good enough. Right. Instead of the name Socrates under, right, this image, it says his name is Mediocrities. Guys, okay. I thought this would fit this one because assumptions and belief systems and stopping points, responsibility. There's a bunch of these things that are in here that are quietly, subtly operating beneath the surface that affect the success or failure of absolutely everything we do before we ever take the first step to do them. The technique, the sparring, whatever. Okay? And I know we all think that we're rational people. We all think that we can lead left brain because that's what ego wants to believe. Okay? Except that there's a whole bunch of shit underneath the surface. Just like, if your car has a shitty engine, no matter what it looks like on the outside, right? At some point, you're going to be thumbing it, right? So, your spouse or boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, right? Be the hottest thing that's ever walked on, water, cement, whatever. Okay. But we all know, if you've been around for more than a couple of miles, we all know it's what's going on underneath that can, wow, make a huge difference. James, would you agree?
Yeah.
Yeah. I had a mentor one time who said, Jeff, whether or not you end up with a nest egg or a goose egg, you know what that means, right? Nest egg, like you got some savings, you got some stuff built up, whatever, or a goose egg, zero, right? Depends to a large degree on the chick you hook up with. Get it? It was an egg, chicken, kind of. Anyway, all right. So, is that the only thing? No, of course not. Right? It's also our life choices. Anyway, we got James. Anybody else on? Any questions, comments?
No questions or comments. Just
No military guys going, oh man, I remember those Roman sit-ups. Holy shit. Right. No.
no, just a mystic energy checked in from
Cool.
say good evening, but other than that, nothing yet.
Awesome. All right. Well, then back to it. All right. So let's take a look at the next failure. Right. The next failure is what I call the constraint fallacy. Ooh. Right. So anyway, constraint, right? Constraint, right? The ability to restrain yourself, hold yourself back in. It's not what you say. It's sometimes what you don't say, or it's not what you do. It's sometimes what you don't do, right? It's the ability to withhold things or hold certain things back and lead with others, right? So constraint is a choice, okay? It's the answer and the opposite to when somebody goes, I couldn't help it. Couldn't help myself. I don't have a choice, right? I had to do it. No, right? Now, you may have had to do it because you have no compulsion control, right? But constraint is a mastery skill, right? All masters, all experts, right? All people that are highly successful have the ability to delay gratification, to focus on what needs to be done, right? Based on prioritization, right? What needs to be done today to move us forward, not all the shit that other people or pressure or my manic personality or whatever tells me has to be done, right? Mission focused, right? So constraint is a choice. And some people opt out of it early, right? Most training, martial, organizational, whatever, right? Quietly, subtly, by implication, or whatever, assumes constraint, okay? And most people's logical plans assume constraint on the part of the bad guy. Like if I do certain things, he'll change his mind. He'll do something else. You hear it all the time. People go, well, see, if I really did that, you would. Yeah? Or people do something, will be doing randori or something, somebody will do something in the dojo and, joking around, whatever. It's usually when they're fairly new, right? And they'll do that little move or whatever. And I'll go, you better render me unconscious and be not findable when I come to, or just kill me. Right? Because a lot of people assume, the whole knockout kind of thing, right? Ends the fight. See, there's always a what's next, but that's a vestige, that's a holdover from sport mentality. Okay. Other ones include pain will discourage further action. We did a whole, if it wasn't a Kuden, it was a Warriors Whiteboard Wednesday on pain is overrated. Okay. Because some people have a neurological problem and pain doesn't affect them. For some people, certain types of pain actually is processed opposite. Got a couple of people in my family that have this thing where in the heat of summer, where they should be taking precautions against heat injuries, they're actually cold. And the opposite happens in the winter when they should be concerned about frostbite, they feel hot. So either like when they were young, adults could override that and go, I don't give a shit how you feel. You will wear a coat or you will do this or whatever, right? Now as adults, that can be problematic, okay? Because nobody can tell them what to do. Okay? Other people have a very high pain tolerance. I have a very high pain tolerance. And so pain doesn't discourage further action. For some people, pain actually triggers more aggression. And for other people, whether it's neurological, whether it's from chemical induced altered states, right? They may not be able to feel the pain at all, or it just might be delayed. So I'm expecting when I hit that quote unquote pressure point, right, that this is going to do something to them, but the system is screwed up so they don't detect the pain for a couple of seconds. And in a couple of seconds, they can deliver a couple of blows or stab you a couple extra times or whatever. Okay. Another one of these things is that damage will cause reassessment. You know what I mean by that, right? So I hit them, I break something, whatever, right? And they reassess their life choices, right? Change their mind, decide they don't want to fight, whatever. Okay. Loss of balance will create pause. Maybe. But if we're throwing everything in like this is the guarantee, okay, like if I break their balance, right, they're going to stall. Some people were gymnasts. Some people are us, right? Balance breaks. Don't wait for it to break too far, right? Immediately drop those hips, drop those knees, be okay with doing a break fall or a roll to get back on my feet. Once you get really, really good at that, as soon as you start dropping to the ground, balance is recovered very, very quickly. So there's no pause, right? Or, right, and this is a big thing in Musashi Ryu and things that we've inherited, and some things that are part of other Japanese martial arts, that during the break fall, there's a counterattack that occurs. Okay. So we think that because they're going to the ground and there's nothing they can do, then we're perfectly safe. Yeah, no. Right. That's how Takamatsu Sensei, Hatsumi Sensei's teacher, was deafened in one ear, like lost hearing completely. I was throwing this guy, and his throw was good. This guy hit the ground, unconscious. Okay. But as that was happening, as he was going to the ground, Takamatsu Sensei was also blacking out and dropping to the ground. So here you got two unconscious guys on the ground, except Takamatsu Sensei is bleeding from his ear, because right in the middle of the throw, this guy, based on the system he was in, popped him in the ear and knocked him out. Okay. So Yeah. One of the lessons that I learned from my teachers is mutual death is not an option. So, however, right? Again, mid throw, everything's good, right? I'm going to get the point. Yeah, well, you may get the point, right? And then circling back to what I said at the very beginning, with that whole premise of knocked out, fights over kind of thing. Down means done, okay? Just because he got knocked down, if he's not out, could be rolling over, could be getting up, could be reaching for a weapon. Yeah, but he's running off. Yeah, okay, where? Does he run into the truck to come back with a shotgun or a machete or three friends or whatever? Right? What's next? And just because he might be down, that doesn't mean one or two of his friends isn't rushing in, or the Good Samaritan, or the Popo are showing up, or whatever. Okay? I would have never called myself Popo back in the day, but I know you guys use all kinds of weird slang things. So anyway, right? But again, those assumptions collapse very quickly in the real world. And if our assumptions about the way a self-defense situation or a fight should go run into one of these things and a whole bunch more, and creates surprise, creates frustration, whatever, right? Yeah, things go sideways really fast. Okay? So, yeah, right. We have to remember pain doesn't stop everyone, right? Balance lost doesn't guarantee hesitation. Having the guy mid throw still doesn't guarantee anything, right? And down does not mean out, right? This is in theory. Okay. Again, drugs remove inhibition, emotional fixation narrows perception, criminal conditioning rewires response, right? The thug life, all that kind of stuff, right? And speaking to that, right? I have several students, black belts and whatnot, that like me grew up in the hood, right? Um, and there's something in that world, whether it's people in gangs or whatever, certain neighborhoods, right? Certain cultures where they already don't believe that they're going to live past 25. So they got nothing to lose. Okay? Or they have already assigned a zero value to their life. Right? And so what we're looking at is this a nothing to lose mentality, right? This mentality ignores cost entirely, ignores consequence entirely, right? They've already accepted that they could die on any given day. So it's impossible to put the fear of God into them because they're going to keep coming if their body is capable. Okay? And this is not about good people versus bad people. Okay? It's about different operating logic. Right? And if your training assumes that the brakes aren't there, or your prevention policy believes that you can rationalize violent intent, then the first thing that breaks is your system. Okay? So again, in the PX8 system, that or framework that students get, very first, it's part of Mod 1 training, right? That 8 phases of effective self-defense strategy. That's what some of you know it as. Some of you know it as PX8. Some of you know it as the PAR system, whatever, right? And PAR is preparation, active response, and recovery, right? And it just takes the 8 phases and splits them into these different sections, right? The very first stage or phase within the 8 phases is general awareness. It is not the same thing as paying attention or situational awareness that everybody thinks of, right? Pay attention to your surroundings. No, that's phase 2. General awareness is, and we're always working on general awareness, right? It's what kind of problems could show up for me. In Mod 1 training, it's what are the most common attacks right? At least in our area, in our region, for where most of my students live and or would travel to, right? What are the most common attacks? That's where we start people's defenses. Okay. What do those things look like? How do they take shape? That informs mod 1, mod 2, mod 3, all the training. Okay. Even when we bring the the traditional lineages in as primary focus, Kotoryu, Gyokoryu, Kukushinoryu, or whatever, right? We're looking at these, but we're always answering the question, what conditions in our lives today would make any one of these approaches a best option? So students are not just learning things in a vacuum. They're always matching it to conditions, to attacker type, as in build, strength, musculature, whatever, right? Weapons, environment, attacker type from the operating logic, right? How they go about attacking, right? Sometimes it's related to size or build or whatever. Sometimes it's based on programmed, training or where they grew up or whatever. Okay, but again, if training assumes breaks, right? BRAKES, right? Um, uh, Ceilings, right? Stopping points, right? Things that would make somebody change their mind or whatever. If it assumes those things that aren't there for the attacker that's in front of you, some people develop like a way of fighting all the time. Like that will work on every single attacker. And of course it works. They've proven it to themselves that it works in the fights that they've been in where it worked. Right? Just like strength or speed or whatever works until it doesn't. Okay? Just like your favorite weapon works until that's not the right answer for the moment. Okay? So anyway, we'll take a look at another one here in just a minute. But James, questions, comments, anything? Anybody new sign
Hmm. No, still nothing.
Still nothing. Okay, so there's another thing that can happen here. The last one I was talking about was assuming breaks, right? Because my belief system says, right, because like if I hit this pressure point, that'll show. But where might that come from sometimes? Okay, because it might be told to you by a teacher or somebody who taught you something, right? If you do this, no can defense, right? Well, there's some things that I have learned that when it's done, there is no defense. Okay. But they have nothing to do with pain because there's systems that you can affect in the human body that do not require for that person to feel it or anything. It is autonomic. It is physiological, right? It doesn't require pain compliance, anything like that, right? But we could be taught or come to believe that certain things are true, right? But we can also be our own enemy here. Okay. There's this thing in psychology called transference. Okay. This is kind of a bridge point for us, right? Because this is not just about assuming breaks that aren't there. This is about projecting your breaks onto somebody who may or may not have them. Okay. And again, it's a bridge point between me, my values, my inner workings, and the outside world. Okay. And assuming that everybody should think, speak, act, plan, whatever, as I do. Okay. And again, this mistake underneath all of this is this thing called transference. Okay. And transference is projecting your values, your limits, your decision logic, all that kind of stuff, right, on someone else. In this case, what we're talking about is someone who does not share them. Okay. And good people I am going to make a differentiation here, right? Good people do this constantly. Okay? They assume others value pain avoidance because they avoid pain. They assume escalation happens in stages because that's the way they learn things. They assume rules, manners, or policy matter mid breakdown. Like somebody's having a meltdown, somebody's having an anger management moment, whatever. Right? But that's not true. Right? Threats of punishment, getting fired, going to jail, or whatever, they only matter to people where that matters. And there are signs and cues that you can pick up from people when it does, but to count on them, right? And here's the line that matters, okay? Remember this one. Good people project their breaks onto someone who has none, okay? You see this in the dojo. You see it in HR, in companies. You see it in the zero tolerance doctrine, right? That's why the book that I'm going to be releasing here soon about workplace violence and really getting something in place that works. The title is the entire premise. Zero tolerance doesn't work. Okay? Yes, it does, right? People comply with that stuff all the time. No, good people who are concerned about losing their jobs or having a criminal record or who, whatever, right? That's who it works on when they're rational. Okay? Even people with anger management issues, right, will self-regulate, right? I don't care if they take the day off, leave midday, go to the bathroom and throw their little fit in there, chain smoke during their lunch break, whatever. Okay? But the moment that doesn't work, the moment that doesn't matter, right? The moment that calling the police doesn't matter. None of that. None of the rules for preventing anything based on zero tolerance and what you're going to do afterwards. None of it matters because those things they require what? They rely on compliance, following the rules, being concerned about the same things that would concern a rational person. Okay? So in the book, I talk about two very specific personality types that the entire policy should be written around. Okay? One is this irrational person, and in different industries, that shows up in different ways. In medicine, it shows up one way, or in healthcare, it shows up one way. In general business and manufacturing, it shows up in another. In psychiatry, counseling, that kind of thing shows up, right? And I know it's still connected to healthcare, but may or may not be the same. So one is the person who's having a meltdown, who cared about your policy 5 minutes ago, but now couldn't give a shit less because they're only focused on one thing or one person or a group of people or whatever. Okay. And the second one is the person who is actually targeting you. And again, individuals, martial artists, self-defense people. Okay. Just because I'm talking about a company doesn't mean that this doesn't reference you. And organizational leaders, just because I'm talking to individuals, doesn't mean that there isn't a parallel. I come at things from principles and concepts, not based on static imagery or static job titles or whatever. Okay? That's what allows me, and that's what allows people who really get this stuff to be able to operate across domains, parenting, leadership, emergency planning, or whatever. Okay? Because it's about the principles and concepts that show up. They look differently in different contexts, but they're all running the same way. Okay. So anyway, back to this, right? This projection, right? This transference. Okay. You see it in zero tolerance. You see it in the call the police thinking, right? Like if I say call the police, that will deter this person. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. That's why in the PX8 system, in the 8 phases, right, we have uh, distraction and we have dissuasion, right? Distraction is using humor or anything else to get this guy's mind off of it or to give you an opportunity to escape, right? To fall back on phase 3 and escape to safety. And then we have dissuasion. So it's in there, right? Prevention is in there. Escape is in there. All of these things, because they're all possibilities, right? We don't just jump right to the whole fighting thing, right? But dissuasion, right? It's in there because it can work if it matters to this person, okay? But the 8 phases system, and the 8 phases framework, anybody's looked at this: general awareness, situational awareness, escape to safety, distraction tactics, dissuasion tactics, which are both de-escalation, physically dealing with the assault, and then post-assault conditions, which could be PTSD, could be whatever, right? Could be workplace policy, whatever. And then the last one is dealing with the legal system. Okay. All of these things are potentials for resolving the situation, even if it's just removing my nary ass from the problem area, right? But if you look at this from a different perspective, what you're looking at is not only is everyone a potential solution for ending things before it goes physical, and then I have to worry about post-incident trauma or breakdown or whatever, or risking my, freaking retirement fund on, keeping my ass out of jail. Every one of them is not only a solution so it doesn't go to the next danger level, but each successive danger level is there because the previous one failed. Okay? It's designed for multiple failure points before you have no choice, literally, legally have no choice but to physically defend yourself. And then there are failure points after that, right? System breakdown, whatever, right? Legal system fails to, or you fail to communicate properly so that you come across as Joe Dickhead or vigilante or whatever instead of justified defender. Okay. Now, lots of prisons that have their fair share of people who are justified in self-defense, but communicated poorly. And I don't mean they lied or didn't manipulate the system or whatever. I mean, they were justified, but they didn't communicate things properly because they didn't understand the system, right? And they didn't communicate clearly, and they didn't know what to communicate when, so that it was clear that they were not just somebody who was trying to game the system and claim self-defense. There's way more of those people, right? That I'm just defending myself. No, right? But they also didn't have a use of force system worked into their self-defense training. And so, right? Anyway, right? But these tools matter, right? Okay, the zero tolerance thing, the call the police thing, all these things, right? That's why they're in the PX8 system, right? They all matter before collapse. As soon as collapse occurs in one area, it doesn't matter what we intended to do. It doesn't matter what we tried to do. It doesn't matter what we thought would work. It doesn't matter what we assumed. None of that matters. What matters is that reality is still pouring a bunch of shit in our direction that we need to handle. Okay? I talked about this last episode, where one of the assumptions that's made in businesses that have workplace violence prevention policies is that if a situation occurs, if an incident occurs that could not be prevented, then we're not liable. Like, didn't count. We had these things in place, we couldn't prevent it, and therefore we're not liable. It's not true. It's not the way the world works. It's not the way the law works. It's not the way reality works, right? When one thing fails, liability doesn't go away. It doesn't disappear. Responsibility doesn't go away, right? It escalates. It gets worse. It demands more, right? So what we're getting to here is, right, at the failure point, right? Once the situation is on top of you, transference, the assumption that they would, should, whatever, do, think, respond, or whatever, like you would, that becomes dangerous, right? Because you're waiting for behavior. You're trying to analyze behavior that isn't coming, right? And all we have to do is think about the last argument we had with somebody. Okay? My wife and I have an agreement. Right? There are just certain things that, because of the way who we are, how we see the world, how we process things, that kind of thing, right? There are some things that we're not going to come to agreement on. So our agreement is to agree to disagree. And we have mechanisms for that, because what's more important is the relationship. It's the friendship, right? So that is a thing, okay? But that's really difficult when somebody's trying to beat, break, or kill you, okay? To wait for somebody to come around to our way of thinking, or what, just because we think they should, that's not only causing a problem with relationships, but it's also the thing that eats a lot of people up on the inside or whatever, because they have expectations that the world should just do what they think and say. And I know there's another part of their brain that denies that, right? No, no, that's not true. No, I don't expect that. But actions speak louder than words. So again, that's why we do personal development training as well, because protecting ourselves against ourselves, right? Not only is it important for our own sanity, but it's important to make sure that we're not the one causing the thing that's coming at us to beat, break, or kill us. Whether that's physical, mental, verbal, legal, financial, whatever. Okay? Again, we need to be careful that we're not waiting for behavior that is not, will not, and in most cases cannot come, because the operating system in the other person is just completely different. Okay? All right. So, as a reminder for people that are just coming in late and whatnot, we're taking a look at, why our effort, right, fails us, okay? And how assumptions, right, subconscious, unconscious assumptions actually cause the collapse, right? Cause the failure, whether it's goals or it's our own protection or whatever. Okay. Right. So before we take a look at why simple answers fail, right, and why people defend them, James, what do you got? Anybody questions, comments? Dave usually has at least one.
Indeed, he does.
There you go.
It's like gun control laws. Bad guys are bad guys because they don't follow the law.
There you go. Yep. Gun control laws, right? We're just going to impose more on, but we don't know who's good and who's bad. And I know that's a chance you take in a quote unquote free society or whatever, right? I trust everybody I meet at first contact, unless I pick up something that just seems off, right? But that's not guesswork, right? It's usually in the way they communicate, or body language doesn't match a sense of confidence or a sense of weakness that they're trying to explain, right? I remember one time at my martial arts school, these two guys walked in, and one was shorter, the other guy was tall and thin and whatnot. I got some vibes from the first guy, or from the second guy, right? Tall guy. Just had this presence about it. And the other guy starts talking and everything, that they're shooting this movie and whatnot, and this is his stunt coordinator. And they were scouting out locations, and one location was the town that I live. And it was because they weren't going to shoot in the entire town. It was the courthouse, right? It was based on time period and this clock and the whole deal. They were going to shoot this thing, and it's his action flick. And so what they were doing was going around and looking to recruit martial artists as background artists. You know what they are, right? Not the guys that paint backgrounds, right? But the ones who are either just kind of walking through a set, whatever, right? They just look like they're people on the street, or all the way up to henchman number 2, whatever, right? And so fight scenes would be choreographed and whatnot, and it was just easier for them to hire people that are already trained to do that kind of thing, even though it's not their style, but right, to do that kind of thing. And just kind of, he's the stunt coordinator, and I said, you ever do martial arts? And he goes, I dabbled a little bit. And I said, oh, okay. I get a feeling that you do more than dabble. He just smiled a little bit. And he goes, maybe a little bit more. I said, all right, enough said. And I never saw him ever again, but that's what I'm talking about. That kind of intuitive sense. Okay. And I wasn't calling anybody's bluff or whatever. There's a sense from people who can carry themselves. There's also a sense from people who present confidence, but there's body language, facial microexpression cues, things that the eyes do and whatnot, that just spell cover up, right? They're hoping that nobody pierces the facade, okay? False front kind of thing. And this is one of those skill sets, right? It's the advanced progression of understanding kamae. Okay. Once we understand that kamae is not a stance. Okay. Only the people who are stuck on stances can't break through to see a kamae as this holistic state of being, right? Anyway, so but gun control laws, all that kind of stuff, right? Just imposing that, like, if we take them away from everybody, then I actually heard a judge once say, pro gun control, actually said that if we make weapons illegal, then criminals must calm down and assimilate, because they would have no other choice. Like, my head is probably partially flat in the front from the number of times I've just smacked the crap out of it. So yeah, there's that, right? But again, this goes back to transference. It goes back to assuming that these people think the same way. If women wouldn't dress a certain way, then they wouldn't be raped. And I get it. I understand where that thought could come from, but as an ex-federal cop, it falls on deaf ears, because that doesn't explain how the middle-aged businessman, right, does that to a 5-year-old little girl, or the teenager or 20-something does it to a 90-year-old nun, right? And these things happen all the time, right? There's just all this shit that just goes on where people make these wild ass assumptions. Okay. That's victim blaming. That'd be like saying that if the TV didn't look so alluring, the thief wouldn't have broken the display window and stolen it. Interesting. And the reality is that some people have an operating system that says, for me to be successful, I don't need to work hard. I just need to find those people who do work hard, have already made the money to buy it, and I'll just take the shit from them. It's just easier, right? So this is what I'm talking about. We need to be careful that we're part of self-defense training, part of violence training in any context is understanding the different types that we could be up against. Because the response, the rules, the response, the control mechanisms, and all that for each of them is likely very different. Okay. So, anyway, let's jump back into this next part here. And again, if you're new, not new, but maybe you haven't been on for the whole thing, you just jumped in recently and whatnot. Again, we're looking at why systems fail, why the best laid plans, why good people, serious people, right, that are just putting tons of effort and energy and whatnot into getting things done, still have things fail, still have things collapse from under them. Okay, so let's look at the next one, right? Now, this is a deeper failure, okay, and a very human one. Right? Again, it's not a judgment thing, okay? This is a basic, primal human thing. Anybody that studies Mikyo with me, right? We get down to these very, very just innate things, okay? And this one is that humans want relief from responsibility more than they want capability. Okay? This is the martial arts student that asks if they have to learn to roll, or they have to learn this skill or that skill, because they don't want to have to do it. Right? And will quit. A lot of them will quit if the teacher says yes. Okay? They want relief from responsibility more than they want capability. Okay? Simple answers feel safe. It's just what it comes down to, right? They say, if I do this, I'm done. Right? They say, if I follow the rules, I'm protected. Right? It's that company that says, look, I have a full workplace violence prevention plan and policy in place. This couldn't be prevented. No liability should exist. I actually worked for a lawyer one time that hired me because a nurse had been violently assaulted in an emergency room. In the hospital she worked for, barely had a workplace violence prevention policy, which, again, see, this is another one of those fallacies, right? People put one in place and then think that it covers everything, except that the only people that ever see it are employees. In this case, the threat came from outside. So to expect that patients, visitors, vendors, whatever, have seen it, agreed to it, signed off on it, and will follow it, in this case, in a drug-induced stupor when they're not thinking rationally, is in and of itself irrational. But again, I'm thinking rationally. So, but anyway, so so I was hired for this thing, and it eventually went in our favor. But I'm not a prevention expert. Right? I'm a response expert who understands the need for and use of prevention. But that's not where my work stops. My stuff is in between, right? I'm that bridge guy. Prevention has failed, and this person may or may not be around for you to punish. So here's where we need to save lives. Here's where, like, the major collapse is happening. Here's where the unthinkable is happening, right? It's the hole, it's the eye in the storm between what we thought we needed and just in case they don't comply, here's the extra or else that'll help them change their mind, right? So anyway, I did this report and everything that was, you read through the depositions and all kinds of things and submitted my report. But I was up against a prevention expert. That's like somebody who fixes cars talking to a rocket scientist. Right? I'm not telling you which side I'm on, right? What really matters is that they don't mesh, right? Although most people don't know the difference. Okay? So get this thing back, right? By his very admission, right? Mr. Miller's very admission, this thing was unpreventable, therefore. So my rebuttal to his rebuttal was, yeah, wasn't preventable, which is why these 6 types of training should have been in place to mitigate or to take care of this realm, because there was nothing in place to account for failure. What happens when your prevention stuff stops working or doesn't work? Liability doesn't go away. Now they're up against a lawsuit and major stuff and OSHA fines and all kinds of things, right? Regulatory things and whatnot that way worse. Like liability didn't go away, right? There was a shitstorm now, and that's what they were trying to backtrack on. So, long story short, they settled. Right? Anyway, so again, they thought they followed the rules. They were protected. People that are like, I'm a nice person, right? Who would want to protect me? The number of people that we've asked, we've been at fairs or we've been had a table set up here or there or whatever, and somebody goes by and, hey, you ever thought about taking martial arts classes, self-defense? And people are like, why would I? Have you read the news? I'm a nice person. Who's going to attack me? I don't hang out in the bad parts of town. I don't. Right? I did all the right things. So therefore, okay? But the reality is 99, well, maybe not, 96.2% of victims across all time, right? I'm not talking about gangbangers. I'm not talking about, criminal underworld, nothing like that, where these guys know, right? They're going to go up against each other, whatever. I'm talking about everyday people. The vast majority of them held the exact same belief until moments or seconds before they were a victim. And that was, some of you already guessed it, never going to happen to me. And then it did. Okay? The martial arts, right? If I trained hard, it should work. I did my 1,000 repetitions, whatever, right? Worked in the ring. The number of people that have commented on my videos, right? All this ninja backwards mumbo jumbo bullshit, right? All you need to do is put some gloves on, get in a ring, because that's the best place to test your skills. Yeah. Under those conditions, under those rules, with those mechanisms in place. Yeah. Okay. Those things are comforting, very comforting. Okay. But solutions quickly become identity. Systems crystallize, right? They become known as styles or systems or best practices, right? But when that happens, observation, awareness stops. People stop paying attention, right? So they don't notice exceptions to the rule, so to speak. And it shows up everywhere, right? Belt testing mentalities, best practices worship. Again, the zero tolerance mythology, right? The I did everything right thinking, whatever, right? My teacher, Hatsumi Sensei, warned about this directly. Right? He says, if you think you've got it, you've created a ceiling. Right? If you think you'll never get it, you've created a ceiling. However we define anything, we create a ceiling. We create our own limitations. Okay? Create our own box. The danger isn't ignorance. It isn't not knowing any better. Right? The one we're talking about here, the danger is premature certainty. I've got it all figured out, or I don't have to worry about it. Either way, I got it all figured out, right? Because we want to not have to worry about it anymore. As soon as we're certain on something, we can stop thinking about it. Okay? It's the same thing that happens when students, like we're going to Japan in May. And it happens, right? It hasn't happened in a couple of years because of COVID and all that, but typically it happens every year, right? And I've had students tell me year after year after year, it's going to be next year. It's going to be next year. Can't do it this year. It's going to be next year, right? That procrastination, right? I used to really try to figure out what was at the root of procrastination, right? You know, they keep putting it off, keep putting it off. Why keep putting it off, right? It's not because coming up with that much money is scary. It's not because those are all symptoms, right? What's behind procrastination is I am relieved of having to deal with the pressure that comes from thinking about this stuff. And then what people do is they don't think about it again until the deadline is approaching and pressure picks back up again. And their safety valve is, well, I can't do it this year, so I'll do it next year. And immediately gives them breathing room. Okay? So again, people want to escape from responsibility more than they want to attain capability. People do it when they jump from one church to another because they don't like how the minister or the priest is teaching or the standards they have to live up to. They jump from martial arts school to martial arts school. They move from company to company, whatever. Okay. So, talk about best practices next and the illusion of safety. But before we do that, James, I'm back to you. What do you got? Anything? Do you ever notice how when we do an episode on like physical skills, like or defending against certain attacker types or whatever, like the numbers that show up are just astronomical. And when we do something that has to do with internal work and whatnot, yeah. Again, right? Who wants to work on that shit? I'm me, right? I just want to be able to wipe the floor with his ass. As long as I have the skills and knowledge to wipe it. No, we don't want to. I don't even want to think about that, right? Because once I've learned, and once I have my style, and once I have my preferences, no one can defeat me. Yeah, okay. Anyway, all right. I don't know if James is having a glitch on his end, but we're just gonna keep. Well, actually, let me see. I will. I can't do it from my end. Oh, maybe I can. What do I have over here? Let's see. Good evening. Good evening. So gun control. That's one dumb judge. I agree. That's an Alanism right there. Right. Let's see. In fact, I did it. I started with a jab and I improved. Okay. Anyway, all right. So let me jump back into my notes here because I still have quite a bit to cover. All right. So this is where leadership needs to listen carefully. And I don't care what role you're in, right? Because I believe that everybody is in management and everybody's in leadership and everybody's in advertising. What? Look, anytime you try to convince somebody to choose you, to select you, to stay with you, to hang out with you, that's marketing. Advertising. You're presenting yourself in a way or communicating in a way that they find acceptable, want to hang out with, want to go along with, want to hire you, whatever. Okay. Management, even if you're just managing yourself, you're managing your life, whatever. Okay. Now, the level of management skills, that's where the rub is, right? And what else did I say? Leadership. Okay. Even if you just think that you're responsible for somebody else's safety, that's a leadership role. Okay. If you offer suggestions and recommendations, even to adult children, it's a leadership role. Okay. One of the big glitches that people have is again, it's the responsibility over capability kind of thing, right? I don't want to be nobody's role model. It doesn't matter if you call yourself a role model or not. Somewhere in your life, somebody's looking at you saying, I want to be just like them. Even if it's just one part. Okay. For instance, I had an uncle, chain smoked like a friggin' chimney, right? I mean, and they were unfiltered, whatever, right? Slovenly, whatever. Okay. Didn't want to be built like him, didn't want to look like him, didn't want to smoke like him, nothing like that, right? Okay. He was a womanizer, cheated on my aunt on a regular basis, that kind of thing, right? But the guy was funnier than hell. Told jokes like nobody else I'd ever met, right? So he became my first role model in telling jokes. He didn't try to be. He was just always preloaded with a joke or two. Okay? And they were always different. So it doesn't matter if we want the job title. Okay? And this is where the difference is. If we accept the responsibility, then not only are we accepting the responsibility for that realm or doing that thing, but now we have to accept the responsibility. Maybe. I think we do, but this is just my opinion. To develop the capabilities of doing that well. Right? But again, just my opinion. My show, my opinion. Anyway, so again, this is for the leaders. Okay. Organizational people will know this, right? Whether you were in anything, supervisory position, management position, whatever, in whatever institution, organization, whatever. Okay. There's this term, right? Best practices, right? Supposedly, right? It sounds like everybody's doing them, right? Best practices. I look at a lot of these best practices, especially in my realm, workplace violence, and I'm like, who the hell came up with these things? Somebody sat around and thought these were good ideas. I want to know where they came from. I want to know how many people are using these. I want to know how often they've worked. Have they been tested? Or are these just a list for compliance to maintain your insurance? Found a couple that are that way. Or state licensing or whatever. Okay. Who was behind these things? Okay. But either way, in most cases, in all cases I've experienced or run into, best practices, there's my air quotes again, right? Assume stable conditions. Okay. They're usually copied, not pressure tested, and they age poorly. What that means is people put them in place. The company grows, the organization grows, people change, roles change, all that kind of stuff. And that's never updated. Okay. Because it's a checklist and it's not based on principles that will work even when the environment, whatever, changes. Right? That's not opinion. That's history. Okay. Part of my history, speaking of which, I know I've got some folks on that have the same kind of history, right? In the military, field manuals, unlike many corporate things, especially corporate workplace violence stuff, right? They're not written or rewritten or updated or whatever by committees in calm rooms. Okay? In the military, field manuals, training manuals are updated regularly, usually after major conflicts. Right? Sometimes on the fly, but the manuals themselves, right? Not written by committees. They're written, rewritten, or updated by survivors of the most recent conflicts. That keeps the material fresh and workable and doesn't allow or minimizes theory creep. You know what I mean by that? Right? People sitting around, they're not under pressure. They have no idea what it's like to being inside that bubble. And this all seems like it's a good idea. You know, I call it the kitchen table philosophers sitting around talking about like major problems in the world, right? If I were president, if I were king, what I would do is, okay. In some of those instances, you crap your diaper. But anyway, right? Not you guys, you're all enlightened, right? But the point is that these things are written or put together by people with experience, okay? And sometimes, like I said, they're usually updated every couple of years after like a major conflict, change in tactics, change in enemy operations, change in equipment, all that kind of stuff, right? But there are also these after action reports that occurred during conflicts. Okay? And these things aren't just about like, hey, were the rules followed? No. What worked? What didn't work? What failed? And why? And then adjustments are made and sent out to make these changes. I'm a huge history fan, especially when it comes to warfare. Okay? I'm not like a warmonger or anything like that, but I want to understand how things came about. So, like, I'm a behind the scenes kind of person. Okay, American Civil War. Most recently, I've been spending a lot of time going through World War II. Okay, and just the number of times that like a low rank, quote unquote, nobody, right? Somebody that was watching his people die, right? Did something that actually violated Army doctrine, Army policy, right? Like you couldn't weld things onto whatever, right? But in one instance, a tank mechanic who used to be a farmer, and somehow he developed a sighting system where he welded wire, like from like just baling wire, right, across the gunner's port that frame things a certain way, right, that like tripled their hit ratio, right? And that was like, you were not allowed to weld things to military vehicles. You can't change whatever, right? If you have ideas like that, you're supposed to pass them up the chain. Then a bunch of engineers do a bunch of testing and all that kind of stuff. That usually takes a year and a half, whatever. They come and do a bunch of things and they test things out and all that. And he's like, screw it. He snuck into the motor pool one night, did this thing, and didn't tell anybody. Next day, and it was just a one tank, right? Gunner gets in. He sees some weird scratches or whatever in front of this freaking thick glass that's right there. And he tells his tank commander, and the tank commander's like, hey, dude, check this out. He has to come over and sheepishly go, I did this thing. And I'm telling you, we did this thing on the farm. We were able to do this thing and whatever. And this tank commander goes, all right, look, I'm going to leave it where it is. We'll do this thing. If it doesn't work, you can take this goddamn thing off of here because this is my ass. It's my tank, whatever. Right. And it just goes. Eventually, this went division wide. And then like it was either General Patton or General MacArthur, whatever. I think it was Patton. Found out about this thing, shows up because all of a sudden this group, their percentages for hit miss and all that kind of stuff, right? And tank kills and whatnot, just suddenly like went way up, right? So this every time this tank came back, it had a higher thing, and then the company commander had to be told, and he's like, right, and again violation and whatever, and by this time the tank commander, not only the tank commander is like backing up this mechanic, but every other tank commander is like, we wanted to, and so again, even before that happened, several other tank commanders were like, how are you making this happen? So they have him welding the stuff on, and eventually it goes to the company level, whatever, and it just again broke the rules, but right, what they were trying to alleviate was failure. What they were trying to alleviate was, right? And this is real time stuff. Okay. And this is how you create more survivors. And this is how things get changed. And I get it. A lot of organizations don't have anybody in house. Typically, these things are written by people who think it makes sense, or they're literally, I said copied, they're borrowing it from somebody else. When I say copied, right, that hospital I was talking about where I was representing I was hired by the lawyer who was representing the nurse that was literally maimed in this attack. During discovery, when we got their workplace violence thing, they didn't just copy something. They copied something from outside of their own industry. How do I know this? Well, because healthcare facilities have certain vocabulary, and they call these things facilities, right? Or hospital or clinic, something like that, right? Not plant, as in a manufacturing plant. And then, I don't know if they did it hastily to throw something together to try to prove that they had something, or this is what was in place, right? Where the information for the business was, yeah, it was still a manufacturing plant in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and they were in Texas. So, yeah. Anyway, so again, these things are rewritten by survivors, right? Experience doesn't just trump theory; it corrects theory. Adaptation happens after failure, not before, right? And this is where people that are experts in violence, I don't mean in being violent. I mean they have lots of experience in dealing with it. That's your response person, not your prevention person. Have a prevention person. Have your response person look over the prevention things, because they're processing psychologies, they're processing things that theory will never handle. Okay, and this, right, this is where many organizations break. Okay, now this is where families break. This is where Cub Scout groups break, all that kind of stuff, right? Because they're fixated on the rules, they're fixated on compliance, they're fixated on whatever. And it's not until after something happens that you find out that, oh, yeah, this was not a one-off. This guy didn't just snap. He's been off and on acting this way, been written up, or they avoid writing him up because nobody wants to set him off. So we're just hoping that nothing happens, right? Again, prevention assumes compliance. Right? Policies manage behavior, but they don't manage breakdown. Right? When prevention fails, liability doesn't disappear, changes shape. Right? And if response was never trained, consequences multiply. Right? It's called collateral damage. There's a lot of leaders and a lot of businesses, execs, and whatever that believe that if people are trained, then their problem gets worse. But that's That's illogical. If trained people are worse, then surgeons should be butchering more people than thugs on the street attacking people with a knife, right? Police officers should be shooting up the town. Right? The reality is that trained people are calmer under pressure because they are trained. They know what to do, right? They have they if this is true, then do this. If this is not true, then do this, right? These kind of things. It doesn't make any sense. Okay, collateral damage is what occurs when untrained people meet unthinkable things, because human beings stampede just like every other animal when they're scared, right? They will harm others to keep themselves safe. They will throw people under the bus. Right? So again, consequences multiply. The liability goes up, not down, and it certainly doesn't disappear. Okay. All right. So let me just continue on with this, and I'll check back with questions here. But from a ninja's perspective, and I don't mean the movie Ninja. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? And I mentioned this earlier. Okay. Staying functional when structure dissolves is the primary goal. Training so that we can stay functional. It's not about being right or wrong. It's about being appropriate in the moment, having the right skills and the right strategy and the right tactic that matches reality in this moment. Okay. This is what it means to be grounded correctly in Ninpo. Right? This isn't mystical. It isn't aesthetic, right? It's not a show. We're not just dressing up a certain way, right? It isn't technique centric. This technique over that technique. Is this an official ninja technique or is that a Taekwondo technique? Right? We have ninja ways to apply Taekwondo things, just the context is different, right? The core principle is this: discernment never stops. Okay? Knowing what's really right and what's not in any given moment, right? Yes, you have to learn kata so that you can learn correct movement and you can explore the why is this a best practice? Why? How does this control a situation, right? At that stage, no deviation, no variation, whatever, because variation at that stage for a beginner who hasn't learned proper movement yet or proper alignment or whatever allows them to have shitty alignment. Just right, skip right over things. Okay. Well, I prefer to do it this way. Okay. I wouldn't attack that way. If I were if I were attacking, well, we're not defending against you or your type of attacker during this technique. Okay? I don't get that. I would punch that. That's a stupid punch, right? I jab and right cross. Well, first of all, if we've managed distance properly, you're not jabbing anything. And even if you try to jab to throw me off, it's not going to affect because I know you can't reach. If I know you can't reach, it won't trigger a flinch response. Okay. If I'm close enough to jab you, then I'm in range for your shit. I'm not going to put myself in that position. Because this isn't a fight, this is a survival situation, which means I'm going to wait till you come to me and I'm going to wait until you make a mistake. Our techniques are applied while the attacker is busy doing something else, missing, stumbling, whatever. If I'm throwing something while he can deal with it, I'm not doing Ninpo. Okay? I'm risking my life and my family's future. Okay? So, discernment never stops. Paying attention to what's important, to the reality in front of me. It's always happening. Okay? Kamae isn't a fighting posture. It's rhythm governance. It's access allowance or deterrence, right? It's a refusal to sync your nervous system to his. Okay? We don't move like the attacker. I tell people in class all the time, right? Don't fight like he does. He's already, one, better at that or more experienced than that, no matter what your ego wants to believe. Two, if you fight like him, he's seen it how many times? He already knows what you're going to do or what you're likely to do. He already has developed defenses against it. He knows what to look for, the tells, all those kind of things. Right? No. Okay? In Ninpo, we refuse to sync our nervous system to his. Okay? We don't move like him. Right? You don't accept his tempo, his timing, his rhythm. You don't fight on his terms. Right? But I see it all the time. People are really good at taijutsu. And then next thing you know, they're sparring with somebody who's in Taekwondo, or that boxer guy, right? Starts bouncing, right? Doing that little rhythmic thing that they do to prep for a kick. Next thing you know, this taijutsu person in kamae that's supposed to be grounded and low, right? Next thing you know, they're bouncing. And then their feet are coming in closer and closer, right? And now their stuff won't work under those conditions because it's not designed to. Okay? There's this term, heijoshin, everyday mind, right? This is not another term for calm meditation, right? This is usable awareness under collapse. That means heijoshin this is familiar to me. It's as familiar to me as tying my shoes every day. Okay? There's certain things I'm going to do, and there's certain things I'm not going to do. Okay, just like when I'm tying my shoes, right? I'm going to pull my finger out at a certain point when I make the bows come together to tighten things down and not leave my finger in place. I'm not going to wrap the laces around the chair leg, right? That kind of stuff. Okay. I know what to do. I barely have to put any attention on it, right? I can have a conversation while I'm doing it. Okay? That's the level, or that's the degree to which we need to get our skills to. Okay? Again, responsibility doesn't end at intent. Doesn't matter what our original intent was. We move up there and we take up a kamae because we're going to control things this way. Next thing I know, this guy starts bouncing and he starts reading like a taekwondo or a Thai boxer or something like that. And so I know, shit, lateral kicks are probably on the menu. So I changed my kamae. Okay. But this is my favorite kamae. No. Okay? My intention is to be appropriate in the moment, determined by context, fighter style, whatever, not to win a certain way with a certain technique from a certain kamae. No. Okay. Responsibility does not end at intent. It extends through outcome. Until this thing has been resolved, I'm responsible for what I let in, my awareness, where it goes, how I prioritize. Okay. That's what keeps you functional when structure dissolves. Okay. All right. I'm going to close this out here to just kind of, there's nothing else other than, join me on Wednesday for Whiteboard Wednesday. I haven't selected my topic yet, but it's going to be something out of here that can translate to physical things, right? But let's bring this home, okay? People plan correctly for the world they know. But survival, physical, organizational, familial, whatever, right? Spiritual, depends on functioning in the world they hope never arrives. I'll say that one more time. People plan correctly for the world they know. But survival, physical or organizational, depends on functioning in the world they hope never arrives. Well, if I plan for what I know, but survival depends on operating and being functional in the one that I hope never arrives, well, there's a disconnect here. How do I see? The first question should be, what do I need to know about that one that I hope never arrives? Not just that I'm trying to prevent it from arriving, or when it arrives, I'm gonna. Okay? What do I need to know about that? Well, if I don't have anybody in house, if I don't have a friend, my dad didn't teach me like tic-tac-toe, whatever, and he's the one with the experience in actual combat, then I need to find somebody. that knows what it's like inside there, that can help me prepare for that world. That's part of the prevention process. Believe it or not, one's ability to respond and remain functional under stress, people can read that. People that matter, whether they're attackers or other people that need to feel safe and confident and whatnot, can feel that bleed, can feel that presence. Right? Being prepared, being able to respond when prevention fails, makes an organization harder to attack. But more than that, what makes you harder to attack isn't because you've got guns sticking out all the windows and all that kind of stuff. Is you're not predictable. This isn't about fear. It's about clarity. Right? This is what we train for. This is what we examine. This is what we look at. Right? So again, just something else to think about. Because again, if we're going to be successful at accomplishing goals, whether it's everyday stuff or specifically based on what we're talking about here, right? Defending against violence and those kind of things, then we need to be clear about what that situation is. Okay. If you're on the mailing list or if you're just on any of these platforms that we're on, I'll be posting something here. Should be tomorrow. If you don't have the PAR or the PX8 or the 8 Phases of Effective Self-Defense worksheet, I'll be posting a link that you can get that. It's on me. Just have it. But this is that phase 1 of general awareness. What is it that, right, we need to focus on and we need to know about? Phase 1, it's the thing most people overlook because a lot of people are focused on phase 6 because that's the fighting part. Right? Other people, generally speaking, some of the other stuff, escape to safety, dissuasion, whatever, right? But by and large, the thing that's overlooked the most is general awareness, because most people just sum that up as, I know that the danger exists in the world and it could come at me. Yeah, I got that. No. General awareness conditions every other phase on that worksheet, every other phase in the framework. And the more we know about the conditions, about possible conditions, about potential threats, about potential attacker mentalities and methodologies, then we can train, we can put the right things in place so that we can create form out of that's what our second degree black belt's about. The ability to string your bases together in an unbroken flow, a logical unbroken flow against a single unarmed attacker throwing whatever they want, and you can use Nippo Taijutsu alone. You don't have to fall back on anything else to defend against that person. Okay? That's not how many techniques did you learn, how many kata do you know, or whatever. There are certain kihon, right? Bushadori, Motegyaku, certain kamai, footwork patterns, those kind of things, that's the stuff that'll save your life. That's the stuff that everything else is all the models are built from, right? It's the logic, it's the stuff that you can't see that's embodied by that kata or that model. That's second dan. In the old Bujinkan ranking system, I don't know what it's going to be like now that other Soke are doing things and the Bujinkan's making a shift. But the old system, based on promotion and whatnot, based on Atsumi Sensei's words, right? Our Nidan is equivalent to 8th or 9th Dan in that more or less subjective system. But not here to compete, whatever. Okay, it's just a friggin' belt. It's just a number. What matters is the capability. What matters is the responsibility for. Right. Anyway, I don't know if James is still on or not. James, are you still on? James' little circle here is black. So, oh, there he is. Ta-da! Look at that. Ding! And out of the ether comes Super Ninja. Any questions, comments, anything like that popped up?
No, I don't see anything.
Okay. Well, if anybody has anything, we call that latent brilliancy around here, right? Any of those things show up, you can always post a comment or send us an email or ask in class. That'd be cool. Otherwise, I hope this landed well, and I hope that this is as much of a joke to you as it is to me, because while there is good enough, that's subjective, right? It is what I did to handle the situation in front of me, dictated by reality, right? It was good enough to get me home. This is not dictated by not wanting to do the work, shucking responsibility, all those other things, right? Okay. So, anyway, so let's not be a mediocrities, right? And I don't know what would be a ninja-nocrity. I don't know. Anyway, all right. So if there's nothing else, go ahead and wrap this up, and I will talk to everybody else next time. Where? On Kuden.
Get more of Kuden Radio, subscribe through your favorite podcasting site, or join our clan of serious modern warriors at onlineninjaacademy.com.